Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Thoughts Between Shots, a storytelling podcast where one great question leads to one unforgettable story. I'm your host, Nammy Sirur, and every episode I ask my guest a question that leads to a fun story, and then we break it down to figure out what worked, maybe what didn't. So, if you want to learn how to become a better communicator by asking better questions and learning to tell really powerful, effective stories, this is the right place for you. My guest today has this incredible ability to tell stories in a way that touches your soul. I'm not even kidding. And I'm so excited that let's just bring her on. Albina, I have a question for you. When was a time when something big or wonderful happened that you couldn't explain through logic or rationality?
Well, Nammy, don't I have a story for you? I am butt naked in one of those empty hotel saunas in Helsinki, Finland. It is so warm here and it's so quiet, so I decide to pray because a lot has happened in my recent life. First off, I sold my thriving yoga business, 7 yoga studios all over Houston, a community of 60,000 yogis. I get rid of all of my worldly possessions. I grab my husband and my kids and I take off to travel the world. So here I am on month 8 of my world travels in Helsinki, Finland, literally pinching myself in disbelief that life can be this great. And yet, a part of me is totally freaking out. When I left my old life behind, when I left my old identity as a business owner and a community leader, I left a part of me. And here I was traveling, living my best life, and yet feeling discontent and guilty about feeling discontent because I don't know what's next for me. And a part of me feels like I have to know what's next, what I'm going to do next, what is ahead, how I'm going to earn money. And I didn't have a plan. And because of that, I was freaking out. So I'm sitting in this hotel room in Helsinki. And in an attempt to make myself feel better, I start a prayer of gratitude. And I thank God for my abundant blessings. I thank God for my health and my husband and my wonderful kids and my world travels and on and on and on. And suddenly I hear a voice. Oh, honey, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I just laugh out loud because, first off, I didn't know that God was so country. And second of all, I am shocked by such clarity of communication from the divine because I'm acutely aware that I am indeed having a conversation with God. So, with a mixture of disbelief and shock and awe, I say, okay, God, show me what you got. Literally, a week later, we show up at this beautiful farm stay on the rolling hills of Tuscany in Italian countryside. To my surprise, the woman who owns this farm stay is Asian, and her name is Marina Kim. Now, it may not be so strange, except that my mother's name is also Marina Kim. Not only that, but this Marina is half Russian, half Korean. My mother is also half Russian, half Korean. And lastly, this Marina is from Kazakhstan. I too am from Kazakhstan. So weird. A few more days go by, and I go to the reception of this farm stay to get to know this mysterious Marina Kim. And when I walk into her reception, there is a group of tourists from the Czech Republic. And because we're all from the former Eastern Bloc and we speak the same language, right away we get into this super engaged conversation. And out of nowhere, literally in Russian, we say it's as though somebody pulled me by my tongue. Out of nowhere, I start telling this total stranger my entire family tree. I tell him that I was named Albina after my grandmother, who died tragically together with my grandfather when my mother was only a small child. And out of nowhere, for some unknown to me reason, I tell this guy my grandfather's full name, Емельян Елисеевич Kim. And right in that moment, I feel this weird energy. I feel it in the air. I feel it viscerally as every single hair on my body gets electrified. I look around trying to figure out what just happened. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this Italian Marina Kim, disoriented, pale. She's literally nearly fainting. I was like, what just happened? Did I say something? Did I do something? It turns out that my grandfather, before he married my grandmother, had another wife who is this Marina's grandmother. In other words, Marina and I have the same grandfather. And out of all the places on earth, I had to randomly walk into this farm stay owned by my cousin I never even knew existed. You're right, God. I ain't seen nothing yet, and neither have you. You see, after I sold my businesses, after I got rid of all of my worldly possessions, I left my life behind. I left a part of my identity, the identity of me being a business owner, a community leader. I was lost. I thought I needed to have a plan for the future. I thought I needed to figure out what I would do next. And I didn't know. I didn't know. And not knowing is super scary. And maybe you too don't know what to do. Maybe you're stuck in a job that is sucking the living light out of your soul. Or maybe you are in a relationship that you know deep in your heart is not the right relationship for you. You're being called, you're being pulled towards something greater, and yet that fear of the unknown is stopping you. The real life miracle of meeting Marina Kim, my long lost cousin I didn't even know existed, has opened my eyes to this deep knowing that I'm always being divinely guided. I actually don't need to know what is yet to come. I don't have to see the whole path. All you need to do is take the first step in the direction in which you're being pulled towards your dreams, towards your desires, and then simply surrender and trust. Because even if you think you know stuff, honey, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yay! I love that story so much. Anyone who knows my and Albina's relationship, we met at Toastmasters here in Austin, and this was back in 2021. We had just met, and then the club went virtual because, just like the rest of the world, COVID shut everything down. And so at that point, all our meetings were virtual, and I had access to our recordings because I was on the board at the time. And I was at a moment in my life when I was facing a lot of turmoil. I had a big life event happening, and I was looking for answers, and I didn't know where to turn. And then Albina told the story, and I just logged into Zoom one day. I didn't even know Albina. I had met her all of twice in person, and I just logged into our Zoom account, and I had to watch that story just to sort of give myself some sense of hope. And I immediately reached out to Albina and said, I need to meet you. And so that's how we met. And we ended up meeting in person. Turned out that she was then preparing for a yoga retreat at that same place in Tuscany, which to me, I was just like, oh my God, this is a magical moment. I have to go on this retreat. And I have been a huge fan of Albina ever since. She's become my spiritual guru and one of my closest friends. And it all happened through that one story. So, again, that is the power of story. Albina, I'd love to go into the background of the story and, why it works. But first, let's tell the world who you are and what you do and why storytelling matters in your work.
Well, I I'm like Madonna, constantly reinventing myself.
Love it.
So my background is I started my career as a CPA, as an accountant, double majoring in accounting and finance. I worked in a big four accounting firm. I worked for the airline, got to travel the world. And then I decided to pivot and open a yoga studio. And
Hmm.
then over the course of the next decade, my husband and I grew that one small yoga studio into a yoga empire. I mean, not really, but kind of jokingly. We had a hotel that we transformed into a yoga and meditation retreat center. Then, like I told in the story, we sold that business. We traveled the world. And now I made another pivot. Now I'm a realtor. So I keep changing what I do. I keep pivoting and I tell myself, oh, I'm iconic like Madonna.
I like that. That's a
Which
good way.
in real life, it presents itself is often being super scared and not knowing what's next and doubting your decisions. And this actually brings me to the point that retelling this story was so powerful for me because I needed that reminder. It's
Oh.
so funny how the universe works. I personally needed this reminder that I don't have to figure it all out, that I'm always divinely guided, and that even when you think you know stuff, like the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, the divine can always surprise you in such ways that will completely blow your mind away.
First of all, so glad that, yeah, this did serve as a reminder because this story, I feel, has magical powers. Like, I'm sure it's touched so many other people in different ways. And, one thing I find really interesting is how many iterations of this story, at least I've heard, having known you for all these years and having known you as a speaker too. And so I'm wondering, for anyone who's trying to figure out, okay, well, I have the bones of this story, but I need to adapt it to different audiences or different lengths. What do you try to keep in mind? How do you adapt this story, and what advice do you have for other people on how to adapt their stories?
Yes, that's a great question, Nami. I have adapted the story to many different audiences. So when I am speaking to the business audience or a group of entrepreneurs, I'll probably flex the fact that I've had many successful businesses,
Mm.
and I'd probably add more about what kind of business I had, and that I've grown this yoga empire, this hospitality business on top of that. I'll add on to the fact that I used to have a juice bar and an online educational platform, and then I pivoted and I sold. So I would definitely tailor the story uh, leaning more on my business background. Now, when I tell this story to the community of yogis and spiritual people, of course, I'm going to totally emphasize the fact that God was like the divine was talking to me, and I was meditating and praying in that sauna, and I literally heard the voice of the divine. And I will talk more about being divinely guided and surrendering and trusting because that audience will eat it up.
Yeah.
And then the neutral audience, I would probably just briefly, similar to what I just did in this speech, I would briefly touch on all those points, but not too deeply. And even the beginning, over the years, I had like 25 different beginnings to the story. Today, I chose the one where I'm butt naked, right? Because
Yeah.
it grabs your attention.
Yeah.
But if I were to present the story in front of business people, I'd probably pick a different story. I'm alone in a hotel sauna in Helsinki, Finland. I would skip the butt naked part. What I want to say is that this speech evolved with me,
Mm.
meaning on the surface, it seems like it's just an interesting story to tell, but I had to deeply explore my own takeaways from that incident and
Mm.
what I make it mean. And as the years go by and I get more wiser, I reflect on that event. And as I evolve and as I make a new meaning of what happened, I have to say that the story is also evolving with me. When I first told the story, it was just like, oh, this cool thing happened. But then over the years, it became a deeply spiritual meaning to me, right? To trust, surrender, and God is always leading you. So the story has evolved, and those little tweaks evolved together with the story. It's just the power of certain words. Like I said, I don't even know. I mean, there's 15 versions of the story saved on my laptop, but I'm sure I had many, many more versions. It's just, I believe that a speech will always evolve hand in hand with you evolving as a person.
I love that you said that. That is exactly what I was thinking of before our conversation, because I was like, I want to talk about how this has evolved with you. I'm so curious. What were some questions you had to ask yourself, or what were some revelations you made that sort of helped guide the direction of the evolution of the story?
Yes, I think the main question that I ask is, what do I want my audience to take away from this story?
Hmm.
And when you, Nami, shared with me that in some ways the story was, I mean, I don't want to say life changing, but it
Yes.
helped you in one of those pivotal moments in your life. And that was such an eye opening experience to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this story, this incident that happened to me can be so beneficial to somebody else. So when I tell this story on some level, I'm always keeping you in my heart because my intention, my wish is that it doesn't matter where people are in their lives, but every single person takes something special to them out of this story.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one more thing I wanted to ask you. When we first connected, I remember the very first thing you said to me. You came up to me after a meeting because I had done a speech about accents, and you were like, "I'm so glad you talked about your accent because as a non-native speaker, that's something that I've always wondered about." How did you think about telling these stories on such big stages? How did you kind of deal with those insecurities or imposter syndrome? Did you work with a coach? What was your process?
Well, the answer to this question is multifaceted, just like the story can be multifaceted. Because my background is yoga and meditation, and I am indeed a deeply spiritual person, before I step in front of large audiences, I do a little kind of like a meditative process where I surrender. And meaning I surrender myself into the hands of a larger power and I say, okay, move through me. So, in a way, it is not even me who is delivering the speech, but a power so much bigger than me moving through me. And maybe some people will roll their eyes when they hear that, but I'll tell you that is why this speech was able to touch your heart in that moment in your life when you needed to hear something. I believe that it was not me telling the story. Do you know what
Mm.
I mean?
Yeah.
It's ultimately the divine power, the universe, whatever you want to call it, was moving through me. I believe that that energetic, that spiritual intention that you said before delivering the speech is a major component of the
Mm.
speech. And everything else is just, little tweaks,
Yeah.
2 millimeter adjustments. So I'd say 80% of my speech is that energetic intent. What do I want to accomplish through my speech? And every single time it'll be surrender to something bigger than me. Use me as your instrument, as your vessel to deliver your intent, your wish, your desire. And that 20% that is kind of like the details, the technicalities of the speech. I've said this speech I don't know how many dozens of times in front of Toastmasters, right? Our community of public speakers have given me lots and lots of feedback. I swear, anytime I say this speech, half of those people in Toastmasters are probably like rolling their eyes, not again, because they already memorized this speech, not even me. But I also worked with a coach.
Hmm.
I worked with a couple of coaches on this speech, and they helped me a lot as well, public speaking coaches.
Okay. Nice. When you were talking about the intention thing, it really struck a chord because I believe that 100%. If you put the right energy into something and the right intention into something, the result is always way better than when you just like do it kind of begrudgingly. And I mean, for me, something as simple as cooking, right? I can always tell when something is going to turn out well versus not, because if I do it with a lot of heart and excitement and enthusiasm, it's always going to turn out really good. If I do it as a chore, it's going to suck. And it happens with literally everything. So, yeah, that's so right about energy, intention, being in service of your audience, whoever that is, for whatever purpose, right?
If I may add something,
Hmm.
for anybody who is listening to this podcast and wants to, be evolving their public speaking skills, let me make that a little bit more practical.
Hmm.
Right? We can sit here and kind of hold on to our crystals and be like, oh, make it spiritual, make it intentional, but what does it actually mean? I'm a very practical person. So the way I surrender in delivering my speech, I pause and I take a deep breath.
Hmm.
And in that short moment, maybe a second, maybe even shorter, when I take that deep breath, that invisible force, I'll give that invisible force an opportunity to flow through me. But a lot of people, when they get on that stage, they get super nervous, they get up in their heads, they stop breathing, or they're breathing very shallow. And when you're not grounded, when you're in your head, when you're not breathing, that special force cannot embody you. Does it
Yeah.
make sense? Or you're just you delivering the speech. Yeah, and when I'm talking about is it is not me delivering the speech. Whatever you want to call it. I do believe it's divine force talking through me. So I ground down, I feel my feet on the floor, I breathe deeply, I relax my body, I set an intent before I deliver that speech, and all those little things they add on, and and that is the power of transforming your speech from just you saying some words that you thought into something that touches people's souls and has the ability to help them transform their entire lives.
Well, hopefully, this episode has touched everyone's souls in some way or the other. And I don't mean that lightly. Seriously, check out a lot of Albina's stuff. I'm not a woo woo person in general, but something about Albina's energy and her stories and all of the stuff just really drew me to her. And Albina, where can everybody find you and follow you online?
I think the easiest place to find me would be Instagram. My handle is Albina Rippy.
Mhm.
And then periodically, I do update my website, albinarippy.com. There you'll find lots of meditation recordings, lots of yoga classes. All the woo woo stuff is on my website. All my realtor stuff, my business sprinkled with the woo woo stuff is on my Instagram.
Yeah, go check it out for sure. Thank you so much, Albina. This was so, so fun. And that's a wrap on this episode of Thoughts Between Shots. If you laughed, cried, got goosebumps, learned something sneaky useful, share it with your people. And if you want to pitch a story, a storyteller, or a killer question, slide into my DMs on LinkedIn. I am always on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep being curious and telling good stories.